A brown leather belt was hanging from the rearview mirror of my son's truck. For 3 days, I couldn't stop looking at it. Not because I was afraid of it, because I remembered buying it. 27 years earlier, his 8th birthday. He'd wanted to be grown up, wanted a real belt like mine. I still remember punching extra holes in it because his waist was too small. Back then, he hugged me for 20 minutes. Now that same belt was about to become the reason he lost everything. The county fair opened on a Friday. Our town treated it like a holiday. Food trucks, livestock shows, concerts, thousands of people, everybody smiling, everybody pretending life was simple. My son, Garrett Holloway, was running for town council. 43 years old, perfect teeth, perfect speeches, perfect campaign signs. Everywhere you looked, there was his face. Garrett promised honesty. Garrett promised integrity. Garrett promised family values. Nobody laughed harder at those campaign slogans than I did, because I was his father, and I knew exactly who he was. 3 months earlier, Garrett showed up at my house carrying documents, lots of documents, portatory transfers, land agreements, ownership forms. He dropped them onto my kitchen table. Sign these. Not hello, not how are you, not good morning. Sign these. I looked through the paperwork, then looked back at him. No. His smile disappeared immediately. What do you mean no? I mean no. The property belonged to me. 120 acres, paid off, debt-free. My grandfather bought it in 1947. My father protected it. Then I protected it. Garrett wanted to sell it. A developer was offering millions. The problem? I wasn't interested. That should have ended the conversation. Instead, it started a war. The campaign became more expensive. Garrett needed money, lots of it. Advertising, consultants, events, donors, Dodge management. And somewhere along the way, he convinced himself my land already belonged to him. Then election season arrived, and suddenly strange things started happening. Fence posts disappeared, equipment vanished, locks were changed, UT lines were disconnected. Every inconvenience pointed to one person, but proving it was impossible. Then came the county fair, the day Garrett made a mistake. A local news station was broadcasting live throughout the weekend, interviewing candidates, streaming community events, showing off small-town life. Garrett loved cameras, any camera, every camera. What he didn't realize was that one camera wasn't focused on the fair, it was focused on him. And before the weekend ended, the entire county would watch the real Garrett Holloway appear, not the smiling candidate, not the loving son, not the family man from campaign posters. The man holding a leather belt, walking toward his 72-year-old father, with murder in his eyes. The first strike landed across my shoulder. Not because I couldn't stop him, because I honestly didn't believe he would do it. Not my son, not Garrett, not the boy whose nightmares I used to chase away. The belt cracked through the air, then hit me again, harder. We were standing inside the machine shed, nobody else around. Just me, him, and 20 years of resentment finally spilling out. "Sign the papers," he shouted. I stared at him, breathing hard, trying to understand how we got here. "You're insane." That made him even angrier. Another swing, another crack. "You think this land belongs to you?" I laughed, actually laughed. "It does belong to me." His face twisted. For a moment, he didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a stranger wearing my son's face. Then he grabbed my shirt, shoved me backward. I hit a workbench, tools crashed to the floor. "You are ruining everything," he screamed. "Everything. Not family, not relationships, not trust. Everything. Meaning the election, the development deal, the money." Finally, he said what he'd been hiding for months. "The investors won't wait forever." Investors? There it was, the truth. This wasn't his project, it wasn't even his idea. Someone bigger was behind him. Someone expecting results. Someone expecting my land. Then Garrett made a phone call right in front of me. "I'll handle it," he said. Pause, listening. No. Another pause. He's stubborn. Longer pause. Then Garrett looked directly at me and smiled. The kind of smile predators wear. Maybe he'll learn the hard way. My stomach tightened, because suddenly the belt wasn't the frightening part. The people waiting behind Garrett were. After the call ended, he walked out, leaving me alone inside the shed. That night I barely slept. The next morning, the town square was covered with campaign banners. Garrett's face everywhere. Honesty on integrity.com community first. I almost tore one down myself. Then something unexpected happened. Sheriff Daniel Mercer knocked on my front door. Daniel had known me for 30 years. Good man, quiet man, the kind who listened more than he talked. He didn't sit down, didn't drink his coffee, didn't waste time. Instead, he asked one question. "Walter, has Garrett been threatening you?" The room went silent. I stared at him. "Why would you ask that?" Daniel exchanged a look with his deputy. Then he answered, "Because somebody watching the county live monitoring system reported unusual activity." My heart skipped. What kind of activity? Daniel slid a tablet across the table. The screen showed footage from a camera, not the fair, not the road, the machine shed. My machine shed. I felt my blood run cold, because the entire confrontation had been recorded, every second, every strike, every threat, every word. And apparently, the footage wasn't private anymore. A county technician had already flagged it, a supervisor had reviewed it, and now the sheriff's office had it. Then Daniel said something that changed everything. "That's not the only video." I looked up. "What do you mean?" The sheriff opened another file, and suddenly I understood why he drove here personally, because someone had been recording Garrett for months, and whoever that person was, had just delivered enough evidence to destroy his entire campaign. The person recording Garrett wasn't a private investigator, it wasn't a political rival, it wasn't law enforcement, it was his own campaign manager. Sheriff Mercer let that information sit for a moment, long enough for me to realize how bad things must have become. "Why would his campaign manager record him?" I asked. The sheriff sighed, "Because he was scared of him." That answer surprised me. Not because Garrett had become violent, I'd already seen that. Because fear meant this wasn't new. Fear meant a pattern. The sheriff opened another video. The footage showed Garrett inside a campaign office 3 weeks earlier. At first, nothing seemed unusual. People working, phones ringing, volunteers moving around. Then Garrett exploded. A young staff member made a mistake on a fundraising report. Nothing major, a simple error. Garrett launched a coffee mug across the room. The mug missed the employee's head by inches. Nobody looked shocked, nobody screamed, nobody even reacted much. And that was the most disturbing part. They were used to it. The sheriff played another clip, then another, then another. Different days, different locations, same Garrett. Threats, rage, intimidation, bullying. The smiling candidate from television didn't exist. It was a costume. Then came the final video, the one that changed everything. A meeting room, late evening, only 4 people present. Garrett, 2 developers, and a man I'd never seen before. The unknown man spoke first. "What if the old man refuses?" The room went quiet. Then Garrett answered, "I'll get him out." One developer looked nervous. "Legally?" Garrett laughed. Actually laughed. Then he leaned back in his chair. "He won't be around forever." The room suddenly felt colder, even through a screen. Nobody corrected him. Nobody objected, because everyone understood exactly what he meant. Sheriff Mercer paused the video. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "Can they charge him?" The sheriff shook his head. "Not for that conversation." My heart sank. Then he smiled slightly. "But that's not what interests me." He opened a thick folder. The folder contained land surveys, financial transfers, permit requests, contract agreements, dozens of documents. Many carried my forged signature. Others carried signatures belonging to county employees. Those were fake too. My stomach dropped. This had never been about my property. My property was just the beginning. The entire development project was fraudulent. Millions of dollars, fake approvals, fake authorizations, fake ownership claims. The deeper investigators looked, the uglier it became. That afternoon, Garrett held a campaign rally at the county fair. Hundreds of people attended, news crews, supporters, local businesses. He stood on stage smiling, shaking hands, professing honesty, professing transparency, promising leadership. Then 6 sheriff's vehicles entered the fairgrounds. The crowd immediately noticed. So did Garrett. I watched from a distance. For the first time in months, he looked afraid. The sheriff walked directly toward the stage. No sirens, no drama, no shouting. Just purpose. Garrett tried to keep smiling, tried to keep talking. Then Sheriff Mercer handed him a folder, the same folder I'd seen earlier. Garrett opened it. His face went white, because sitting on top was a photograph. A photograph showing him standing over his own father with a leather belt wrapped around his fist, and beneath it, hundreds of pages of evidence. The entire crowd watched. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but everybody knew something was very wrong. Then Garrett looked up, meeting the crowd, and his eyes found me. For several seconds we simply stared at each other. The candidate and the father he tried to destroy. Then Garrett realized something. The election wasn't what he'd lost. That was the least of his problems. Because investigators had just discovered who was financing the entire scheme. And those men were already trying to disappear. The men financing the project vanished within 48 hours. At least they tried to. Bank accounts started closing. Phones stopped working. Office buildings emptied overnight. Lawyers suddenly became unavailable. The kind of panic that only happens when powerful people realize investigators are no longer asking questions. They're collecting evidence. For years, those developers had operated the same way. To find struggling towns, buy influence, push projects through, make promises, leave locals with the consequences. What they never expected was Garrett leaving a trail behind him. Because Garrett had always believed he was the smartest person in every room. People like that make mistakes, big mistakes. They save emails, they keep messages, they brag. And Garrett loved bragging. Within weeks, investigators uncovered everything: hid contracts, aristocrat commission payments, kickback agreements, fraudulent permits, proprietary acquisition schemes. The project wasn't worth millions, it was worth hundreds of millions. My farm had simply been the first piece they needed. The cornerstone. If they got my land, the rest would follow. Which explained why Garrett became desperate. He wasn't trying to impress investors. He owed them a lot. The story eventually reached every local newspaper in the state, then regional networks, then national media. The headlines weren't kind. Council candidate linked to fraud investigation. Campaign collapse sparks multi-county probe. Violence allegations surface against public official. Each article made things worse. People who once supported Garrett suddenly remembered uncomfortable experiences. Former employees spoke up, former business partners spoke up, former friends spoke up. Nobody defended him. That was perhaps the saddest part. Not a single person stepped forward and said, "You're wrong about him." Because too many people knew exactly who he was. 3 months later, I received a letter, handwritten, from Garrett, the first genuine letter he'd written in years. I sat on my porch reading it, twice, then 3 times. There were no excuses, no blaming investors, no blaming politics, no blaming me. For the first time in his life, the letter contained something unfamiliar: responsibility. He admitted the land deal, the lies, the threats, the violence, even the belt, especially the belt. One sentence stayed with me: I stopped seeing you as my father and started seeing you as an obstacle. I stared at that sentence for a long time, because it was true. The farm was never the problem, the money wasn't the problem, the election wasn't the problem. Greed was. Greed had slowly eaten everything else. A year later, I was repairing a fence near the pond when Sheriff Mercer stopped by. The investigation had become one of the largest corruption cases the county had ever seen. Multiple convictions, multiple settlements, several people permanently banned from public contracts. The entire development collapsed. My land remained exactly where it had always been. The sheriff leaned against the fence. "You know what's funny?" he said. "What?" If Garrett had simply waited, I laughed because I already knew. Several months before everything happened, I had updated my estate plan, not because I was dying, because I was planning. The farm was always going to stay in the family. Always. I had even created provisions protecting it from outside developers, protecting future generations, protecting Garrett. The very thing he wanted, he would have received eventually. But greed couldn't wait. Greed always wants tomorrow's reward today. Sheriff Mercer shook his head. That's a tragic way to lose everything. I watched the sunset settle across the fields my grandfather once walked, the same fields my father protected, the same fields I nearly lost. Then I smiled. No. The sheriff looked at me. I pointed toward the horizon. The tragic part isn't that he lost the land. It's that he forgot what was actually valuable. The farm remained, the family name remained, the truth remained. And for the first time in a very long while, the belt hanging from Garrett's truck no longer felt like a memory. It felt like a warning. A warning about what happens when a man starts measuring people by what he can gain from them. Because the moment you see family as property, you've already lost everything worth owning.